I welcome you all to the course on Gender Studies. This is the first episode in the series. Let me tell you the objectives framed for this episode on Introduction to Gender Studies. The first objective is to explain the basic difference assumed between gender and sex and various tenets of gender studies. The second objective is to introduce the three theories involved in learning gender studies. The third one is to show the students how the world is gendered and how the concept of difference helps us to understand gender studies. If you deny accepting that the world is gendered, there is little use of studying this course. The fourth and final objective is to expose the students to different definitions of gender to trace the relevance of gender studies in the present context. Let us now understand the key differences between these two terms, sex and gender. Although these two terms seem to be identical, they differ in their conceptual framework. They are in fact different concepts. Sex is natural and gender is a social construct. Sex is innate, but gender is inherited. Sex is given, but gender is assigned. In fact, to say there is a close interaction between gender and sex, because gender is nothing but social elaboration of biological sex. So gender operates on the ground of the biology. It uses biology for its convenience. Now, sex is biological, that it is based on the reproductive potential. But gender denotes to visible differences in genitalia and related differences in procreative function. That is to say, if I say male, female, we can readily say that it is biological, physiological. While I say masculine, feminine, there comes the point that it is sociological and cultural and even psychological. Therefore, the masculine and feminine traits are the construction of society, and therefore these two tenets, masculine and feminine, largely determine the gender value. But gender refers to masculine and feminine qualities, behavior patterns, related roles and responsibilities. Sex is considered to be nature in the gender studies, while gender is considered to be culture. To know the difference between nature and culture, nature is something imbibed, whereas culture connotes to qualities a person is expected to possess. Sex is a universal term, whereas gender is variable. It changes under the influence of time, geographical and socio-cultural settings. Therefore, sex may be understood as static, while gender is dynamic, always changing. Say one example: women give birth to babies, men do not. This statement conveys that it is innate or nature or sex. While I say girls are gentle, boys are rough, this sentence tells something about the gendered world. Why not boys are supposed to be gentle? Why can't girls be rough? So this kind of questions can be raised in a gendered world. Now let us get into some definitions. for sex and genders. For sex and gender. Let me first tell some definitions about sex, related to sex. Sex is the name we give to the language through which we speak and come to know our desires, says Glover in his book Genders. The next definition is anatomy is destiny, says Sigmund Freud. But the scenario has been changed because until 2013, English law never allowed altering the legal status from male to female. It was impossible at the time, but now it has become totally free. The altering status from male to female is possible now. Therefore, anatomy is not destiny at all. The third definition, male and female person is decided by masculine and feminine way in them, again by Freud. But gender study questions what is appropriately masculine behavior in one case or acceptably feminine in another. Therefore, it is not the question of adhering to masculine or feminine qualities. It is a question of what is termed or determined as masculine and feminine. It penetrates into the very question of masculine and feminine instead of simply abiding male and female to the two binary oppositions. Let us get into the definitions of gender. John Scott, a historian, says gender is a social category imposed on a sexed body. John Scott, historian, says gender is a social category imposed on a sexed body. Judith Butler, another popular writer on gender, she has written the book called Undoing Gender, in which she says gender is a stylized repetition of acts. So gender is a style, a performance. The bodily gestures, movements, styles of various kinds constitute the illusion of abiding gender self. In fact, desires of social norms decide women and men. There are certain social roles expected to perform. Caring, nurturing, shy, sacrificing are some of the qualities meant for women. Rational, logical, brave, authoritative are some of the qualities expected of men. It is according to the social norms. Therefore, gender is a social construction. Hope you have fairly understood the difference between gender and sex and how gender is related to the sex. Now let us move on to the formal definition for gender studies. Gender studies is an interdisciplinary and a multidimensional study. It focuses on women's studies, men's studies, queer studies. Therefore, we can understand that gender studies does not alone concentrate on women or feminism. But feminism has much scope in gender studies. We have men's studies, queer studies. So in queer studies, we focus on lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender. Therefore, we have various genders having various problems. So it is not alone confined to men and women, but we can say it is confined to masculine and feminine, because these two traits are social construction, and abiding or evading, that is obeying or denying these two qualities, will make certain problems. Either one must come under this masculine quality or feminine quality. It's about similarity and difference. Where do we need similarities? Where do we need difference? That are subject to discussion, and we will come to know of it later. But the thing is to know is that gender study focuses on women's studies, men's studies, and queer studies. Queer stands for strange, unique, odd, or trivial, insignificant, literally. But in queer studies, we focus on the relationship, the unusual relationship as society, the so-called unusual relationship as society deems it. Unusual, odd relationship, or unconventional relationship, or unconventional genders. Now, in fact, gender studies widens the scope of feminism, since it is interdisciplinary and multidimensional. It is an academic endeavor to understand the phenomenon of gender. So it is a short and sweet definition that I have picked it from somewhere. It is an academic endeavor to understand the phenomenon of gender. So two main areas of focus in the gender studies are gender representation and gender identity. To say it literally, how am I represented in the society, and how do I derive or discover my identity in the gendered world and beyond. So it is in fact an inclusive or umbrella term where we have, as I already told you, women's studies dealing with women, feminism, gender and politics, and men's studies which began in 1980s, and queer studies which focuses on LGBT, lesbian, gay, bisexual and transgenders. With this small introduction to gender studies, or a formal definition to gender studies, we have another definition, a universal definition, which can be a universal definition. Gender studies is a field of study that looks at the world from the perspective of gender. Right? Gender studies is a field of study that looks at the world from the perspective of gender. Why is the world gendered? What is the necessity of gender distinction? How does the society make distinction between male and female? Why are the masculine qualities not allowed in a woman? Why are the feminine qualities taken to be shame in a man? Why does a transgender lack privilege everywhere? Why doesn't a lesbian couple marry? How do we treat the gay people? Whether do accept or undo reject gender. Whether do or undo gender, that is, whether to accept or reject gender. So these are some of the crucial questions that we can probably come across in gender studies. Now we move on to the three theories involved in the better understanding of the evolution of gender studies. They are functional theory, conflict interaction theory, and symbolic interaction theory. Let us first know the design of functional theory. Functional literally means structural. Therefore, it conveys the idea that the world is structured. So men and women are given certain roles to play. Therefore, the society can function well. So roles are believed to be proportionately distributed. Men at work, women to nurture. Men for sword, women needle fit, says Tennyson. So men are known for valor, so therefore they are going for war. Women are known for their sewing work and knitting work at home. Therefore, men for public activities. I prefer to say it in a word that men for mobilization, while women for private affairs. I use the word stagnation. So, men are flowing water while women are stagnated water. So men for public activities and women for private affairs. So it is the structure that society has framed for the better function of the society. Saying it in euphemistic terms, euphemism stands for the less vulgar or polished term, men for external affairs and women as home ministers. Doesn't it sound nice? Now, it is undeniable that family is run by material and emotional bondage. Both material and emotional bondage are mandatory to the family. That is to say, living or livelihood, both are essential. One needs to be alive and also to earn income for the survival. Therefore, gender is the right division for the fine operation of the society. This is how the society must be. And family is a mutual responsibility. Therefore, the public sphere and private dream can be shared in accordance with the assigned gender roles, is the core idea behind this functional theory. Hope you believe in the dichotomy and clear-cut structure that society has framed. So far we have not any disagreement with the social framework, right? So let us move on to the next theory called conflict interaction theory. So I have given you a structure, and there seems to be a conflict in the structure which is given. So in such a structure, it seems that men have more privilege, deserving economic and political advantages. They have easy access, in fact, easy societal access of resources and contacts. And this seems to create an hierarchy, isn't it? Hierarchy stands for order. The lower, upper, inferior, superior, just like that. So the apparent hierarchy between men and women denies certain rights to women. Do you agree? Let us move on further. So men are more accustomed to the power that is being enjoyed and attempt using it beyond functional power. So men are more accustomed to the power that is being enjoyed and attempt using it beyond functional purpose. So once they have tasted the power, they don't want to degrade themselves, instead promote themselves. So they go beyond functional purpose of the society. This is where the conflict arises. So it brings in or causes power politics between men and women. So who is to hold the power? Since the power is not equally distributed, that's a problem. So the problem of authority and the problem of inequality. Now problems arise with the distribution of power within the society. This distinction becomes political, and feminism is one such political movement, fights against this inequality and oppression. In short, therefore, there is a conflict in the distribution of power, order, and access to resources. With this, I wind up the conflict theory. Hope now you have a little disagreement with the functional theory, which seemed to be all right. Now let us move on to the third one, symbolic or representative relations, or symbolic interaction theory. Symbolic can be an opposite word for natural, and it can literally be told as representative. What you need to understand is that representation is not always real. Representation may be imaginary, right? So, what the society has projected as masculine or feminine or men and women are mere representative relations. It seems to be real, it appears to be real, but it is not so. It is a culture, that is, it is constructed. Who construct the particular dichotomy? It is again the society. Therefore, this third theory confirms the idea that gender is a social construction. So far we had a conflict in the second theory. Now it has been confirmed that it is a social construction. The problem is with the society. The problem is not absolutely with biology, because gender is not absolutely a biological or natural phenomena as it presumed to be. So here comes the process of socialization. Socialization process is a crucial or a very pivotal process in understanding the gender roles. I will explain about the socialization process in my next episode. Let us here confine to the symbolic theory alone. So, socialization is a scale to measure and comprehend gender roles. Socialization begins in the family, where the child learns all the activities and behavioral traits from its father and mother. So they are constructing the gender roles. And in society, gender inequality is produced through interaction. And gender even guides to day-to-day life. It pervades in moral, cultural, political, economical realms as well. Therefore, gender is expected to be performed. Right? All the world's a stage, men and women are mere players, says Shakespeare. Here we can recollect the lines. Therefore, gender is a performance in the drama of social life. So the symbolic theory confirms that it is a performance in the drama of social life. Therefore, therefore, in a nutshell, initially gender seemed to be functional, well-wrought structure, and later having some conflicts in the structure, and finally it is understood as a social construction. Hope you have understood something about the three theories and how it can be very useful in understanding the concept of gender studies. Now let us move on to the gender difference, because difference matters a lot in gender studies, either to erase it or to exaggerate it. See, human life is one, not divided into two. Human character is one, not two types. But where we cannot see difference, we cannot see gender. The paradoxical fact is, gender similarities also matters. For example, lesbian and homosexual desires are the kinds of similarities, are made out of similarities. Therefore, similarities are also valued discussion in gender studies. Difference among men and among women should also be studied. It is not enough that we study the difference between men and women, but also we need to study difference among men and among women. Because even in men we can come across some violent or non-violent masculinities. Men are not meant for violence. There may be some soft characters who are non-violent. Therefore, these qualities must also be brought up. These qualities must also be brought out. And finally, we need to study the shared capacities of men and women more than in their differences. Because cooperative labor matters a lot for the well-being of society. But even in this tenet, we have products and distributions which are gendered. That should also be taken for discussion. And in short, instead of focusing on difference, we need to focus on relations. Because gender is social relations within which individuals and groups act. The Australian writer KAMALA says, gender as a social structure, the activities or practices which those arrangements govern. Sometimes it is also problematic, since eradicating similarities and enlarging on difference is also one kind of study of gender studies. In fact, to say gender studies often breathes indifference. So with this note, let us move on to some of the popular definitions on gender. Gender studies travel from fate to fake. In detail, gender is considered to be a fate, but the academicians who focus on gender studies wish to make it a fake one, that is an illusion. So gender is deterministic. From gender is deterministic to gender is an illusion. Might be one of the goals of gender studies. It focuses on the dilemma between choice and chance, whether gender is a choice or accomplished, or chance or fixed. So we can place the following definitions under 4 heads. The first one is, gender is not entirely sex-based or biological construction. The Robert J. Stoller says, gender stands for the complexities of tremendous areas of behavior, feelings, thoughts, fantasies that are related to the sexes and yet do not have primarily biological connotations. And the second heading is, gender is a social construction. Under which we have some 2 definitions. The first one is from Simone de Beauvoir, a French writer who has written the book called The Second Sex. She says, one is not born but rather becomes a woman. A popular maxim that is often used in the sociology of gender. The meaning is very simple. I am constituted by a social world I never choose. Even simplifying it, I never choose, I am chosen. It's a paradoxical idea that is simply explained in the sentence. One is simply explained in the maxim that one is not born but rather becomes a woman. Another definition on this heading, gender is a social construction, is from Scott, who says, gender is a social category imposed on a sexed body. So there is some interaction between sex and gender. The third heading is, gender is a performance. Glover, the writer, Glover says, gender denotes the cultural practices or cultural media that enable these desires to be played out. Then the second definition is from Judith Butler. who has framed the idea that gender is a performance. So gender is a stylized repetition of acts. Bodily gestures, movements, styles of various kinds constitute the illusion of abiding gender self. The fourth and final heading is gender is individual's construction or ideology. So gender, says Connolly, an Australian writer, is not fixed, not imposed upon outside from social norms and pressure from authorities, but by people's own construction on themselves, but by people's own construction of themselves as masculine or feminine. Let us elaborate a little further on Judith Butler's concept of gender as a performance. According to her, gender is a matter of choice, of picking up and discarding at will. Gender is a fragile, provisional, unstable, the sum total of its appearances rather than the expression of a unifying core. Gender is a fragile, provisional, unstable, the sum total of its appearances rather than the expression of a unifying core, says Butler. So, gender is not an identity. It is either sustains, that is, endures, or constrains, that is, compels us. Let me repeat, gender is not an identity, it is either sustains or constrains us. So why do we need to study gender? What are the favorite discussion in gender studies? Let's have a snapshots. Gender, whether gender is dynamic or static, whether gender natural or constructed, whether gender is made of similarities or differences, whether gender is a given or accomplished idea. Do we need to understand gender roles and gender identity? Gender roles is learned from external things, and gender identity is something related to internal, something related to internalizing. To prove difference is not to discriminate. So difference is not discrimination. Equality, fraternity, flexibility, factual state are some of the goals the gender studies focuses. In short, gender studies attempts to reorganize the world from mere representation to massive objective reality. What is reorientation of gender? It is to look beyond what appears to be common sense to find out. It is to look beyond what appears to be common sense to find not simply what truth might be behind it, but how it came to be common sense. That is, it starts questioning the very common sense of the world's perspective. That is where it starts reorienting the concept of gender. In short, it hammers the common sense to construct a new interpretation or new sense. I'm a male, female, or transgender, but I'm said so, is the statement to ponder over. We have some common problems in gender studies. I just want to list some of the problems that people of gender studies or academicians of gender studies take seriously. Inequality and oppression, quite common in feminism. Then voting rights, anti-colonial movement, right to own property, homosexual law reform, women's equal employment opportunity, reproductive rights, human rights of transsexual men and women and transgender people, campaign against discrimination in education, sexist media, rape and domestic violence. And if you want to know further about the concept of undoing gender, go through the book entitled as Undoing Gender by Judith Butler. Hope you have understood fairly about gender studies, the difference between gender and sex, the three theories that are involved in understanding gender studies, and some of the popular definitions by great writers as well as critics. Thank you so much for listening. And with this, I wind up the first episode in the series called Gender Studies. Thank you again.